Hey y'all, welcome to The House Call, the podcast where everyday people talk to doctors and various experts to break down important health conversations into just plain English. Today it's me and our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Eugene Kim. Hey Eugene.
Hey Lisa, great to be here.
I'm really excited again for this other episode of our Diets Suck series. And today we're talking about you're not imagining it, your body does actually fight against permanent weight loss. So this is the story of my life. I shared in one of our previous episodes that weight loss has been a lifelong journey for me since my earliest memories of grade school. And I would say, of course, as I get older, it's harder to reach my weight goals. I've never actually come back down to what I wanted to reach, but it's getting harder. And I learned of a concept just recently that I want to unpack with you and for our listeners, which is this metabolic set point that our body has. And it actually, layman's terms, right? Our bodies work to keep us at a certain level. So the more exercise we do or the less calories we take, our hormones and our body will adjust and make that work even like less in terms of impact to try and maintain that weight. Can you talk to us about generally like obesity and what sort of is going on hormonally and biologically?
Yeah. So thank you. And I think this is such an important topic, and you're completely right. It's the idea of something called metabolic adaptation, that in general, our bodies and through evolution are designed to try to not change as drastically as possible. So we've all gone through this idea of, especially people that have been suffering from obesity, that when you lose weight or when you go through a caloric deficit, increased activity, there is this kind of you get this natural decline in your weight. But then you have this phenomenon of a plateau. People talk about this plateau where suddenly it plateaus and you're doing the exact same thing. In fact, you're probably increasing even harder, right? And then it plateaus. And sometimes it might even go up again, right? And it can be very difficult and frustrating because you'd like to think it's all just very easy physics. And even I used to say this, unfortunately, it's a simple calories in, calories out, calorie deficit, and then you're going to be fine, right? But anybody who struggled with weight has experienced this idea of metabolic adaptation, where you go through this area where you so much effort and then it plateaus. And it's very important, I think, for people to understand this because, we all go through that. And what can happen that I see all too often is that people lose hope. And the idea of this occurring is actually can happen multiple times. So the natural course of anybody that goes through a weight loss journey, it's not a straight linear line. It's usually a course of this and you going up. And then hopefully if you continue your effort, it goes down a little bit, plateaus, up, and then different variations of that. So when we talk about metabolic adaptation, it's very important to understand that concept because it's not just you. And it's not when people are going through this, there is this unfortunately self-defeating memory like cycle in terms of their inner voice that could be it's about willpower, that I'm just not trying hard enough, right? And you see this conversation thread all throughout society so often, right? Where you look at someone obese and be like, man, they're just not taking care of themselves. Man, they don't have the willpower. Oh, such a self-defeating. And then it becomes a judgment thing on them, which is completely false. There are so many things in your body hormonally. If you were to take two people, the obese person and the skinny person, right? Same diet, same amount of exercise, that they will have very different effects in regards to their weight gain, their weight loss, and what will happen to them in their body. The obese person, I mean, you've seen this actually many studies in fraternal versus identical twins also in terms of their genetic makeup. So it becomes that, when you take someone that's skinny versus, and this always this, the fit person that's judging the fat person, right? That fat person, in terms of their obesity, the actual fat has hormones within them that actually fight against you. There's this kind of picture that I like to see in terms of a tug of war. You have there are two people on the idea of side of the weight loss, and that's reduced calorie intake and increased physical activity. They're pulling you this way to try and decrease your weight. And then on the other side of weight regain, this idea of a plateau, there are actually three players. So it's an unfair battle. And these three players are two categories are hormones. There are satiety hormones and there are hunger hormones. There are, in terms of satiety hormones, there are something like 9 of them: leptin, GLP-1, insulin, amylin, PYY. These are all complex. And on the hunger hormones that increase your appetite, there's ghrelin. And these are all being released from different body parts. On top of that, you have a third factor in terms of your resting metabolic rate. That will also decrease such that your body, when it senses that you're losing weight, it's saying, holy smokes, what are you doing? I need to start holding on to these fat reserves, because your body's thinking, it doesn't know what's going on. It doesn't know that you're intentionally trying to lose this weight. It's saying, oh my gosh, I need to hold on to this because I've had this for so long that if I lose this, I could be in trouble. And so you have all of these factors that are working against you as you're trying to lose weight that makes it for a natural progression where you're not going to have this continuous weight loss, but you're going to struggle, go up, struggle, go up, struggle, go up. There's actually been many studies that have looked at this, and one in particular study that looked at patients over an 8-year period. And there was a very intensive group intervention arm and then a non-intensive group arm. And so naturally, of course, the non-intensive group in regards to diet, exercise, support, weight loss, weekly support versus the non-intensive group was just basically, I believe it was just a support group, some information, and also giving you a trainer. The intensive group did lose weight, and this one didn't lose as much weight. But over time, by year 7 or 8, even though this weight plateaued, the intensive group, even though they continued, actually started gaining weight over time, despite the same intervention. And what that taught us was that even if you are intensely giving the same input over 7 or 8 years, when you are obese, your fat cells actually give you signals to help retain that. And that over time, you will still kind of gain weight. And I don't give this study as evidence that you should give up. Absolutely not, because that intensive group still had lower weight than the other group. But the point is that weight loss in general is a lifelong journey, right? And I think that it's been great more recently that there's been more acceptance in terms of body habits, in terms of that image. But I think that you need to understand that this can occur for you, and that to be just more forgiving in your mindset, and that over your lifetime is something that you should always be mindful of and continue to try and be healthy.
I mean, we were looking at an alarming stat together, which is 77% of Americans are either obese or overweight. That is alarming. That's over 3 out of 4 people suffer from this. And I want you to talk a little bit to us about, this is not a lifestyle disease. It's not something just out of eating too much and being lethargic. Talk to us about sort of the genetic predisposition to being overweight or obese.
Yeah. So, it's the idea that obesity should be considered a chronic disease. You would not judge somebody if they had cancer, right? You would have compassion for them. And I think too often that when we look at obesity, that people think of it as a lifestyle choice. But it's so much more complex than that in regards to the genetic predisposition that you have, right? I mean, it is getting to be known more and more and more that there are over 100 genes that contribute you to obesity, right? And so there are people that have a predisposition toward it. There are these, for example, Samoans, there's this island in the middle of the Pacific, right? These people, right, their natural genetic history is to be a small island and literally to be on a boat for months and months and months and months and months. That's the history and generation of their people. So they're used to starving. And so their genetic predisposition is to always to hold on to fat. Suddenly you switch them today. Now they wake up and they're not starving on a boat where their body's supposed to retain their fat, but their genetics is made up for that for thousands of generations. Next thing you know, you stick them in an environment where you have a pastry and a carbohydrate exposed to them every single morning, some rice, and some more sugar for lunch and dinner. Next thing you know, you put them in a world of abundance. Then their body is now, their genetic predisposition is now not serving them anymore. They have to be able to, because they're not going on a boat. They're not sitting there forced in areas of starvation where their genetic predisposition served them at that time, but now is not. So to me, it's important in regards to that idea that, it is about a lifestyle choice. That's completely false. The majority is that there's a genetic predisposition and you put them in an environment that doesn't serve them. Our modern American lifestyle, the sad American diet, the standard American diet that we have today. And it's those combination of factors when you break them together that make for obesity, that predisposes them to a host of all other diseases and conditions that they suffer for. And so that's another thing that is that to me, when you look at obesity as a chronic disease, it's not about the look. It's not about how, your appearance, everybody has different appearances, but it's about the health of yourself and being healthy in the future. Obesity has been linked to, 40% of people who are obese have been linked to some different type of cancer. It's not causative, but we know that in specific situations that you are going to have a greater predisposition. I think it's been linked to 12 different types of cancers and in every single body system. And when you talk about conditions that obesity is linked to, especially in females, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which can lead to infertility, the downstream effects of hypertension, hyperlipidemia, diabetes, and its effects on atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, which is heart attacks and strokes later on. Even what's even more prevalent nowadays is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or we call it non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which is inflammation of the liver secondary to all of this. And then we can even talk about obstructive sleep apnea when it comes to obesity, and that leads to chronic higher stress levels of cortisol. The downstream effects of obesity it affects every single organ system. For older men, urinary incontinence, it affects every single organ system in a way that makes your life not as enjoyable as it should be.
Yeah. And that's you just summed up why we're doing this podcast, and particularly this series of Diet Suck, because while obesity is not necessarily the direct cause of so many of these chronic diseases, it is a factor that, if controlled and managed and reversed, could control and manage and help prevent some of these chronic diseases. So that is absolutely why we're talking about this. It's not for the vanity reasons or anything but chronic disease and being the number one cause of death and disability in the US. That is why weight management is so important.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So,
and, we've been in the medicine circles, if I was going to be quite honest, we have been doing our patients a disservice, even among my own colleagues, professionals, right? The conversation generally does not surround obesity, right? Generally, it surrounds the specific factors: hypertension, hyperlipidemia, diabetes. And honestly, even when we do our medical records, this is how we talk about it. We talk about it in terms of these separate conditions, right? That, oh my gosh, I have hypertension. Well, guess what? I guarantee you, if you start moving your body every single day, right? And if you start moving your body and eat less sugars and just get off the couch and get off the carbs every single day, that not only as a natural byproduct, your weight will lose, but your hypertension, all of these things will start to improve naturally, right? All of these specific conditions in medicine that we talk about and that drug companies have targeted with specific pharmacotherapy are all a natural byproduct of us just not moving. And just the simple idea of get off the couch and get off the carbs. And if you start eating more natural foods, start thinking about how your body was treated as our ancestors were, then your body will naturally reward you for that.
I like the idea of the gradual move towards physical activity and diet versus anything that's a fad, that's a yo-yo, that's very intensive and restrictive. Because I did read also, as you were talking about this, metabolic adaptation, or even this defended set point that our body has, that one of the ways to get beyond that is to lose weight gradually. And I read somewhere was about, if you can gradually lose weight about a pound or two per month, even, that really helps versus trying to plunge, right? In any
absolutely. So oh God, that's such an important point. So we always talk about sustainability, and when you start thinking about your weight loss through the lens of this idea of metabolic adaptation, that you're right. People, if you have a sudden weight loss, right, and then you might be excited about that, I guarantee you that that sudden weight loss will not be sustainable. Your body will scream and want to bounce back to a specific weight. Whereas if it's adjusted area of slow weight loss, 1 or 2 pounds per week, this becomes a more sustainable course, not just because of behavior, but because your body will gradually adjust to this over time. Your body is, just by evolutionarily, it fights sudden changes for good reason, right? If you have sudden weight loss, then your body's going to overdrive to try and keep the fat. And this idea of a metabolic adaptation to a metabolic, we call it a metabolic set point, where your body feels this natural area where it wants to keep a certain amount of body fat versus compared to the certain amount of muscle mass that you have. That is a set point that is so ingrained and intrinsic to you as each individual person that literally some people will feel that it takes almost up to 2 years to reset that point, right? Wow. Which is a very, very long time, right? But it makes complete sense in regards to when you think about your body, and as people, especially those who have struggled with weight loss, that this metabolic set point and how your body adapts to that set point, it takes a long time for that to set. And the best way that you can try and adjust that set point is by gradual weight loss that occurs over time.
Doing things that are sustainable. Yeah. So whatever type of healthcare fitness regimen that you're about to embark on, think about it over a 2-year journey. Yes. Because naturally your body is going to fight it for those 2 years. And even then, I think arguably it would be difficult to sustain or get even more aggressive with your health goals. But I think it's a really good takeaway for our audience to think about what can I sustain over 2 years.
Yeah, so absolutely.
We talked about obesity and these 3 different factors that lend itself to obesity. You talked about genetics, you talked about biology, but there is the environmental, and we're saying, hey, don't feel down on yourself because of these environmental or lifestyle choices. But there are things that I think we could do. You talked about just moving every day. Doesn't have to be rigorous exercise. Take a walk every day. Be conscious of what you're putting on your body. But there are other things like sleep and stress that are also things that we might be able to shift in our lifestyle. So can you talk a little bit about how sleep and stress lend itself to the environmental factors that lead to obesity?
Absolutely. When it comes to healthy weight management in terms of the 4 pillars, like sleep and stress management are critical, especially sleep. If you think about the evolutionary kind of aspect of sleep, sleep is when our body heals, right? And that happens every single day, right? We all have a natural relationship to it. We understand it, right? When you talk about you can almost kind of reverse engineer this sometimes. Like if you were to take away certain things, when we need water, we all know that we need food, and we all know that we need sleep, right? Which one of these, if you took away, would we die fastest? And it's not water, and it's not food, sleep.
I would have guessed water.
Wow. Right. If you were to take away sleep for someone and force them to stay awake, that would be the fastest way that you could meet your demise and suffer someone, right? Sleep deprivation is one of the worst things that you can do to the human body in regards. And so that just shows how critical every day quality sleep is important to you, right? And those that are obese, they are more prone to something called obstructive sleep apnea. Obstructive meaning that there is a blockage in your airway. Sleep, it happens during sleep. Apnea is a fancy word for not breathing. And this is one of the most common things that I see in obese patients that they fight with and they struggle with, and that does not allow them to reset that metabolic set point. So unfortunately, what happens with these patients with obstructive sleep apnea is that they stop breathing throughout the night. It's literally a process, and you can hear where they snore, and then it gets to a point where they're
right.
That idea of that, if you can literally imagine the stress that could put on your body, instead of a healing time when your brain is clearing all of the chemicals that it needs to out of your brain, when your body is restoring itself, and there is this resting heart rate that is low, and your body's kind of going into this kind of trance of a cocoon where it's healing all of the necessary things every single night to clear all of the bad pathogens in your body. Suddenly, every night, your body's going,
Right.
this
So if
increase.
your body is not getting into that restorative cocoon like state, then what is it doing the next day? Is it basically saying, I'm not well rested, so I want to hold on to more calories, or, I want to hold on to more of that energy and it's going to reserve it as fat because it doesn't feel rested? Like, tell me what's going on there,
Absolutely. You're
Cecil.
completely right. So, because your body doesn't feel rested, and because your body has just gone through this night of fight or flight, your cortisol levels and your epinephrine levels are a little bit higher. That hormone naturally even though it serves you in that time of fight or flight, if a tiger is fighting you, that hormone is telling your body that I need to keep on to my fat reserves. I need to keep on to energy because I don't know what's going to happen. And so it's this cycle that happens every single night where your body is constantly in a slightly elevated epinephrine fight or flight state where it doesn't know what to do. And so because of that, it's going to retain more fat. And despite whatever you do in regards to the weight loss side, reduce calorie intake, increase physical activity, while this is going on while you're not having sleep, these are going to have a less potent effect, that it won't have as much effect in terms of your weight loss as it would if you were getting normal, natural sleep. So it's critically important that you understand too, that through this journey that you're getting quality sleep. And there are many things that you can do to try and look at that quality. There are sleep trackers now in the market. I mean, honestly, the best way that I, as a physician, is your significant other who's sleeping next to you, I ask them, and they're going to know better than you in terms of how quality your sleep is.
Very, very true. And so, what is some of the advice? I mean, you talked about, okay, if you're suffering from sleep apnea, if you realize you're snoring, if your significant other says that you're sounding like you're not breathing, address that. And when it comes to stress, though, people have stressful jobs. After
Yes,
COVID, life in general was more
yes,
stressful.
yes,
Just being a stay-at-home mom and being around
yeah,
kids, I mean, like there's so many things in our environment that
sure,
causes us stress. Other than
sure.
getting quality night's sleep, are there other things that you've talked to patients about to help regulate that as it pertains to weight loss
Absolutely.
then?
So stress comes back to the same idea of that fight or flight state, right? When you have stress in your life, especially nowadays, we like to call them micro stresses, where you have a slightly
Mhm.
elevated state of high epinephrine release, secondary to all of the stimuli that are coming into you, right? These devices that we have in our hand, they're constantly stimulating us. What I believe is that we all have power in ourselves to control our mind in terms of how we receive those stresses and how we can process those stresses. Um,
And not stress
oh,
eat, because we hear that all the time. I stress eat, right?
yeah,
I like what
without
you're
a
saying.
doubt. Without a doubt. And this to me all comes back to the habits that we can form around how we handle stress. To me as a physician, when I talk to my patients, and I learned long ago, when I first started, I used to think that if I just gave them statistics, if I just scared them in terms of what could happen to them in the future, that would be enough. You hear this, like, I went to my doctor, he told me this, that changed my life. I'm not going to do that anymore. But if I was being completely honest, the majority of individuals, this is not a it's not a good formula. And to me, in terms of how you can change the habits and how you process things, it's about changing your environment, changing these little things that you can do, we call micro habits, every single day that are actionable, whether it's stress meditation, whether it's you make sure you go for a walk, make sure whether it's enjoying time with people that you love, the environment that you surround yourself in little ways. I think that how you control that has a big difference in regards to your stress.
Okay, so we're learning a lot about why it is so hard for some people to lose weight and keep it off. We talked about the choices we can make in our environment, but then there's these two other buckets of genetics and biology that we can't directly change on a daily basis,
Mm,
very, very consciously
mm,
anyway, right? It has to be super gradual and things
mm,
may or may not
mm,
work. But we know modern medicine has
Mm,
introduced some ways where we're fighting directly against the
mm,
biological factors. Talk to us a little bit about
mm.
what that is.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because, it's so easy, I think, for someone listening to this podcast to think, golly, what can I do about there are all of these things that I was born with, and there's a lot of these things in regards to the environment that I don't have control over. But what I think overwhelmingly is that, and I've talked about this before in terms of, there are interventions that occur in modern medicine, and we all know that, right? Whatever, in terms of medications, in terms of consulting your healthcare professional, I think that nowadays there are more and more interventions that are occurring that we can change the course of these other factors to help us reset that metabolic point. There are a host of new classes of medications, interventions that occur that, if you consult your healthcare professional, can definitely help you through this.
What does the medication do exactly that's fighting against the genetic or biological
So
makeup?
nowadays, in terms of the obesity circles, there is a whole new class of medications we call GLP-1 agonists, glucagon-like peptide, that are actually old medications that have been on for diabetes. So they're proven safe because why? They're not a new kid on the block, but they've recently received new indications from the FDA after studying them, because we've always known, and even me and my own patients, this class of medication, we've always seen this, what we call side effect of weight loss, right? I mean, interesting, like if you there and throughout the course of all medicine, there are a lot of medication that we've seen this. Minoxidil, for example, Rogaine, is actually an antihypertensive medication, and they notice this side effect of hair growth. So now they change the indication to hair growth. There are a
Mm.
lot of medications, like there was this one medication, Restasis, where you put it on your literally, it was for eye drops, and then they noticed like eyelids started to grow, and so now they have a primary indication
Mm.
to have your
Eyelash.
eyelashes to grow. So there are, throughout the history of medicine, there are all of these medications that have existed that they've discovered a quote unquote side effect, but it really wasn't. It was an effect that was beneficial. And this is one of those classes of medications that recently we've discovered that have been instrumental, I think, and I think has a great future in regards to obesity, because for me, this class of medication not only does it help for just weight loss, but it helps in so many other categories in regards to lowering your blood sugar, and that have beneficial effects downstream for other disease processes that can affect you. Yeah.
Mm.
So
Good to
it's a very
know.
exciting time. Very, very exciting time is definitely what I would say.
Yeah, it's so great to know. I want our listeners to walk away understanding how obesity works, that some people can be naturally, you know, predisposed to obesity, not to look down on it, not to feel ashamed, not to feel hopeless, and just be equipped with the knowledge that it's a combination of not just your environment, which is what everybody currently thinks about, I feel like, but your genetics and your biology. And if you make the right choices in your environment, to get you going down the right path, no matter where you are in your journey, that with the genetics and the biological factors, genetics perhaps you can't change, but biologically, that there is modern day medicine that you should be talking to healthcare professionals about in order to make sure that you've got your weight under control. Because what we don't want, what Move 78 is here to do, is help be able to move your life expectancy and move your quality of life up by managing obesity and a healthy weight within your life. So we hope this was helpful for you. Thanks again, Dr. Kim.
Thanks for tuning in to The House Call. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on our weekly episodes. And if there's an important health topic you want to hear more about, let us know in the comments and we'll make The House Call. Till then, take care.